Ready for another mid-rock crisis? Because we're not doing rock today, we're doing something else. Okay, we're going to talk about Neil Leslie Diamond. Born in 1941 in Brooklyn, his mom, Rose Rappaport, dad, Akiba, a merchant. Neil spent 4 years in Wyoming when his dad was stationed in the army there. At his high school, he was in the chorus with Barbra Streisand, but they were not friends. He got his first guitar at 16. At summer camp, he saw Pete Seeger. Neil first considered writing songs. After an evening with Pete, pre-med at New York University on a fencing scholarship. He'd drop out to write songs for Sunbeam Music Publishing. He spent 16 weeks as a paid intern, but he was not hired. He first recorded in an Everly Brothers type of duo called Neil and Jack with high school friend Jack Packer. They had 2 failed singles in '62. He then signed with Columbia. The single Clown Town got positive reviews, but it did not chart. Columbia dropped him, and he returned to writing songs for publishing houses for the next 7 years on starvation wages. He wrote Cherry Cherry and Solitary Man at this time. He also wrote at the Brill Building on Broadway and 49th, just north of Times Square. He wrote Sunday and Me for Jay and the Americans. It was a top 40. And then for the Monkees, he wrote I'm a Believer. Also, A Little Bit of Me, and Look Out, Here Comes Tomorrow. I'm a Believer went gold and was Song of the Year in 1966. Deep Purple, Mark Lindsay, Elvis Presley, Lulu, Cliff Richard, all recorded Diamond songs. He recorded Solitary Man, Cherry Cherry, and Kentucky Woman, and he toured as a special guest at concerts by the Herman's Hermits, and once even with The Who. Neil didn't get the idea of demolishing your instrument at the end of the show. It was not his thing. Diamond wrote Shiloh about the Civil War, except it had nothing to do with the Civil War, and his label didn't get that. It's not their thing. In '68, Neil moved to Uni Records, which became MCA Studios, which became Universal Records. His first album, Velvet Gloves and Spit, did not chart. The follow-up, Brother Love's Traveling Salvation Show, included the song Sweet Caroline, Holly Holy in 1969, Cracklin' Rosie in 1970, and Song Sung Blue. In '77, he wrote Sweet Caroline for his wife Marcia, but he couldn't think of a rhyme for Marcia. Sweet Caroline was widely thought to be about Caroline Kennedy. About Marcia. I Am, I Said was a top 5 hit in '71. Took Neil 4 months to write, and Sweet Caroline took about an hour, according to Neil. Are you still thinking about a rhyme for Marcia? Hot August Night, a live album recorded at LA's Greek Theater. It was a success. Many consider this album to be his best. He had enormous crowd appeal. In 1972, he had 20 consecutive nights at New York City's Winter Gardens. They all sold out, and Neil became the first rock artist to headline on Broadway. He took a break from touring until 1976. He worked on a score of Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach. He released 2 albums, Serenade and Beautiful Noise. He also stayed home to help raise his son Jesse. He received $1 million per album advance from Columbia. His first album for them was Jonathan Livingston Seagull. But both Richard Bach and Neil Diamond sued Hall Bartlett, the director, for butchering the content. Diamond appeared in the band's The Last Waltz concert movie. In 1977, You Don't Bring Me Flowers with Barbara Streisand, but they still weren't friends. He collapsed on stage in 1979 due to a tumor on his spine. After recovering from a 12-hour surgery, he began work on The Jazz Singer. His song America had emotional significance for Neil because it was his grandparents' story. The film The Jazz Singer was not successful. Neil was not much of an actor, but the soundtrack was huge. The 80s and 90s were not so good for Diamond, but he sang the Star-Spangled Banner at Super Bowl 21, the one with Phil Simms and the Giants. Yay! America was used by Michael Dukakis as a theme song for his campaign. Before he covered Red, Red Wine, UB40 that was, and it's topped the pop charts. And Sweet Caroline is popular at sporting events, especially in Boston, but also for the New York Mets, as well as the New York Rangers and the Carolina Panthers. In 2005, 12 songs with Brian Wilson went to number 4. Not notable as one of many published Sony CDs to include extended copy protection software to keep the disc from being copied. However, it also damaged legit computer software and was made illegal. It was a pretty big deal in 2005. Sony was clueless. Whenever software is written to prevent something, people will always figure a way around it. Another reason to return to analog. If you ask me, Home Before Dark in 2008 was a big success. And Neil Diamond was inducted into the Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, in 2011. He performed Sweet Caroline at Fenway Park, the first Sox game after the bombing at the Boston Marathon. 2015, Melody, a road album, was released. Now Neil has been in retirement from touring starting in 2018. He has Parkinson's disease. Hanky Panky, Monday, Monday in 66. Number 1, The Feel of Neil Diamond. Heartlight, Solitary Man, Red Rubber Ball, La Bamba. No. 67. Just for You. Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon. Cherry Cherry, and I'm a Believer. You gotta hear that I'm a Believer by Neil. It's totally different from the Monkees. Not totally different, but I mean, you know that that's the song. It's just interesting hearing it with Neil. 3, Brotherly Love. It was a show, and it featured Sweet Caroline, Marsha. Rainbow, 69, Touching You, Touching Me. 5, 70, Taproot Manuscript, Cracklin' Rosie. This album is really odd. Side 2 is really odd. Sitar, Africa, 110 years before Simon and Garfunkel. Mitchell, Roger Williams, Roger Miller, Leonard Cohen, 72 Moods, his best album. Song Sung Blue. I guess if you have to ask, you'll never know. 73 JLS, Flight of the Girl. It's extraordinary. The book is wonderful too, but how can the movie suck? 74 Serenade. 76 Beautiful Noise. 77 I'm Glad You're Here With Me Tonight. 80 The Jazz Singer. 81 On the Way to the Sky. Then Hear the Light. Then Primitive in 84. 86 Headed for the Future in 88 The Best Years. Then Lovescape. Then Christmas. Gotta have a Christmas album in there somewhere. In 83 Up on the Roof. 21 Tennessee Moon. And 98 As Time Goes By. And also Three-Chord Opera. Same year. 24 there were an album called 12 Songs. That's the name of the album, 12 Songs. Home Before Dark. 2000